Father, we thank you for the children that are downstairs, and more importantly, thank you for the volunteers that have leaned in, not just the ones that are here this morning, but all of those who have said that I want to lean in and be part of it. I want to step up, and so just pray your blessing upon all that engages there. And at the same time, we just pray against any glitches and pray that just even in the midst of what may happen there, that you be lifted up and that they encounter you through time of worship, and that we here in this space do the same thing. We thank you for your love and for your provision. Thank you for an amazing morning this morning. And so as we lean into this sort of second conversation about this amazing story from literally thousands of years ago, may it offer something to us as we continue to work through what you desire to do with us. So we just pray, Holy Spirit, that you come, take what I've offered and leverage it. Leave behind what doesn't need to be heard, but leverage all as we look at how we need to depend more on you. So we're just thankful for life in your name. And everyone said, Amen. Amen. So, we're for those of you, maybe this is your first week, the story we're looking at actually comes out of this 800-page tome. It's actually a collection of, it's called the Book of Legends, and it's sort of a collection of writings from the Talmud and the Midrash, which is if I have my Old Testament professor here, he'd be happy that I'm actually sharing this with you. But buried deep inside here is the story of Hani, who was the rainmaker. And Hani is the story behind those of you that have read this book. And if you haven't, there's still plenty of time. I think the paper. I actually have 2 extra copies in my office. If you'd like one, just let me know. Otherwise, I think you can get it off your Kindle for about $9. But we're just going to lean into this for a season here. We got a couple more weeks in it. But just to set it up, there's kind of a fun video here that maybe tells the story in a visual way that I just invite you to take a look at. So the story of Hani, just to go over for just a second, he prayed once, drew a circle, and said, basically told his followers, I'm not leaving this circle until God blesses me, which is kind of a bold thing to say. He didn't draw a semicircle, so he had sort of an exit route out. He drew a circle and said, I'm not leaving here until God delivers. And then it started to rain, as the scriptures say, actually the writings say. And then Hani went back to God again and said, it's not enough. I don't want just droplets, God. I want you to fill the cisterns with a downpour. And so the idea there is a model for us is that as we think about our own prayer life, and as I said last week, one of the reasons why I wanted to lean into this, because we've done all these things talking about doing, but I want us to spend some time being. So that's why we started a 21-day prayer journey. And if you're here for this week for the first time, there's actually out on the tables, there's this brochure here. We're on day 7. We started a week ago Monday. Just walking through, being intentional and praying for And I'm sorry for some of you, I know we blew up your phone at 7:14 a.m., and if that wasn't in your schedule, but it was a reminder to offer you the opportunity we need to just pause and pray. And this week we're actually going to send it out at 7:14 p.m., so maybe it'll lean into your day a little bit better. But if you're going to get out your worship notes, there's a couple things I just want us to lean into. This is kind of a crazy story this morning. In fact, it's one of my favorite stories because it just really lays out something of just God's sense of humor, which we're always sort of amazed by. But the first thing is this. When you think about drawing prayer circles, often it looks like an exercise in foolishness. The idea, for example, all the work that went into the rummage sale, and as we sat there Thursday wondering how this was going to work, and realizing that people aren't coming as quickly as they are, and then even on Friday, and even the idea of what the net proceeds were, to me, those are secondary to the fact of the comment that this person left on our Facebook page. Because again, if you would engage those who had a chance of hearing why that person posted that, it's because we love them with the love of Christ. And so that's important as we think about who we are as a church. But you see, the reason that this stuff is important is the second point there is because if we have faith, it's really we need to have this willingness to look foolish. The willingness to risk to engage others. Now, think about this for a minute. Noah building a boat in the middle of the desert. How foolish is that? How about we heard the story last week about the walls of Jericho. An army marching around the city and not doing anything other than marching and then eventually blowing trumpets. Or how about a shepherd boy named David with a stone going up against a giant? Or how about the wise men who were trying to chase a star to Timbuktu at Christmas time? Or how about Peter getting out of the boat in the middle of the sea? Or how about Jesus wearing a crown of thorns? Or, to make it even more specific to us, how about a group of people buying a house on the street next to the church and wondering what to do with it for the kingdom? How crazy is that? How foolish is that? Think about it. It's like we've invested serious dollars in that. And really? But if we think back to the same list, Noah was saved from the flood. The walls did indeed come tumbling down. David did drop Goliath. Peter did walk on the water. Jesus was crowned the King of Kings. And then in terms of our house, it's beginning to create conversations with our neighbors. Are really about being something to the community, and maybe in a different way. But you see, drawing prayer circles often feels foolish. Because we think, God, you're not going to show up in this. And even as we've talked about, because actually it's almost been a year since you've called me, and one of the first conversations we had was, so we've got this house, and what do we do with it? And I'm just thinking, wow, that's the question that usually when you begin to become strategic, you ask before you get there. But I think that shows how even then you were willing to draw a circle around something and think it through. So I want to suggest this morning, if we look at Hani as a model, is that the bigger the circle you draw, to be some degree, it's also the more foolish you feel. Because you can imagine Hani being there, drawing the circle, all of his friends and his fellow citizens are looking at him, and he's made a statement, and either God's going to show up or he's not. And if he doesn't show up, there's going to be huge embarrassment. But if you aren't willing to step out of the boat, you're never going to walk on water. If you aren't willing to circle the city, the wall will never fall. And if you aren't willing to follow the star, you're going to miss out on the greatest adventure of your life. So if we want to experience God's grace in an amazing way, we have to take a risk. And the most difficult types of risks to take is risking your reputation. And so we can look a little bit at Hani, but I want to jump into the story out of Numbers 11. If you have your Bible with you, you might want to turn there. The scriptures we'll look at are actually on your handout. But let me set this up. Okay, it's the book of Numbers, and it's kind of fun because you'll see why in a moment it matters. 400 years of slavery, God delivers the Israelites out of Egypt. But what's interesting is they're having a hard time getting Egypt out of the Israelites. The Israelites got out of Egypt, but the problem is they don't like, and even look at this verse here, the first reading. And the people of Israel also began to complain, "Oh, for some meat," they exclaimed. "We remember the fish we used to eat for free in Egypt." may I remind you, they were in slavery, so they really weren't free. And we had all the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic we wanted, but now our appetites are all gone. All we ever see is this manna. And that's because they've been wandering in the wilderness because they didn't get it. God was going to make them sort of figure it out, and actually a whole generation he was going to make die off because he wanted them to understand he wanted their allegiance. And it's not much different than he wants from us today. You know, the Israelites remembered what it was like to live in bondage. And if you remember living today, I mean, you think about when the Soviet Union, when the wall fell and the Soviet Union sort of began to embrace some, during Gorbachev and the Reagan era, the problem was that the idea of slavery was actually something that was easier for some of them because they were so used to it. And so as the wall fell and people had to think about being free, they realized there was a weight to that. But if you think about the miracles this morning, just that's happening right now, I mean, just as you're looking at the TV screen, there's literally millions of impulses that are firing across billions of synapses in your brain. Or while you're looking at the screen, your heart goes about its business, circulating 5 quarts of blood through about 100,000 miles of veins, arteries, and capillaries. And we don't take any of that, we usually take it for granted. We don't stop and pause to realize there's something there. Or how about this? To me, I think it's pretty hard to concentrate when you think about this. The planet Earth is spinning at 62,000 miles an hour. I'm sorry, it's spinning 67,000 miles in space at 1,000 miles an hour, which is like, that's crazy. I mean, it's just like, and we're just sitting here, we wouldn't know it. I mean, riding in a car doing 1,000 miles an hour, I think I would know it, right? So let's look at this story. This is what I call sort of a food tantrum that God's people are having. And yet it's interesting that God says that he's going to provide for them here in Numbers 11. And he tells Moses this, and he says, God says, I'm going to give you meat for a month. Okay, meat for a month. And so Moses, get what he says. I love this. Moses says, there are 600,000 foot soldiers here with me, and yet you say I will give them meat for a whole month. Even if we butchered all our flocks and herds that would that satisfy them? Even if we caught all the fish in the sea, would that be enough? And so Moses as the leader is going, okay, great. This is a problem. But have you ever been there? Have you ever been there? That it takes God to show up to sort of provide. Just this week, because sometimes when God invites us into, there's risk involved, and we're never sure what the outcome is. And this week I had a young man who, I really haven't talked to him in probably, it was 2010, we looked it up. I'm not even really sure how we got connected, but we've been friends on Facebook, and since he's actually traveled to several states with his family to plant a church. They were in Florida for a while, and then were, I believe, in Pennsylvania for a while. But through all of this, he is now to a point with 4 children, by risking what he thought God was calling him to do, and he's followed it faithfully, that they just went through bankruptcy. They've lost everything, but they had multiple vehicles, they had an amazing home, and it just keeps getting smaller and smaller. And as I sat and prayed with him, he's like, I've just been trying to figure out what God's asking me to do. And he's moved back here because he has family here, but it's just, he's sort of embarrassed by it because he's to provide for his 4 teenage kids. And there's some disconnect going on right now with the oldest child who's 17, and I get that because if you've lived through the embarrassment of bankruptcy or financial issues, it steals your heart and your joy. And so there's something in that I want us to walk through, because as we talked about downstairs, the idea of what does it mean to be a Christian or be a disciple. And so that's why this conversation for these next couple of weeks is really, really important. But it also reminds me of another food miracle. And another set of numbers, if you will. There's a crowd of 5,000. Jesus doesn't want to send them away. And they come and offer him, the little boy shows up, he's got 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And it's a nice gesture, but Andrew, sort of like Moses, how far is this going to go? I mean, we've got 5,000 people to feed. But like how God normally does, here's the way that we do the math. We do 5 plus 2 equals 7. It's like, okay, that's a problem because we've got 5,000 people to feed. What's interesting is that for God, 5 plus 2 doesn't equal 7. In fact, for God, 5 plus 2 equals 5,000. And if you know the story, what's even more crazy is it not only is it 5 plus 2 equals 5,000, but there was actually a remainder of 12 baskets full of food that they collected and brought back. That's crazy. But I want you to see that that's the God of provision for us. And so in the season we find ourselves at Linden Road in this new fall season, and even in your journey with me, it's okay, what is God calling us to be and do? And so just to share a little bit about my own crazy story, because it's about praying. So actually 4 years ago this weekend, I was finishing up riding my bicycle into, and you understand that's important because 4.5 years ago, 4 years ago and 2 weeks, I didn't ride a bicycle. So the idea for me to hop on a bicycle and ride from the upper left-hand corner is Joplin, Missouri, went over to Springfield, down through to Memphis, down into Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and then over to Atlanta. That's crazy. But as I prayed about that and talked to my children about it and talked to my spouse about it, because I actually left on our anniversary date. It's like, wasn't smart. And then I was deeply caught up in emotion because I realized that I was going to be away from my family for 3 weeks, which I had never done before. And more importantly, I was going to be on the back of a bicycle that I wasn't sure that I was going to even make it 100 miles, let alone the 1,200 that we eventually had to do. But when we got to Joplin, and we pulled together as a team, and actually the lower picture, you really can't see it well, but it's actually myself. I'm on your right, and on the left is that's Aaron Brown, and Aaron's the lead pastor of St. Paul's United Methodist Church, and you'll hear in a minute, I'm going to share a little video that they actually produced a documentary. And so I just want to share this story because even here 4 years later, I didn't think I would be doing what I'm doing right now. So it's crazy. And I offer that to you because I want you to think about what's crazy for you and what God calls you to. So this was a documentary they actually shared so that we ended up riding into an event with 15,000 people in our spandex. Okay, which you have to be comfortable with that. But here's why. Check this out.
I've got the joy, joy, joy.
That's Joplin High School.
Why did God allow this? God never promised us that there wouldn't be storms in life. What He promised us was to be with us. He's with us in the storms. He's with us when we stand at the graveside of somebody that we love. He is with us. That's His promise.
The reason I've been invited on a tour is because our church was nearly destroyed in a tornado, and they got my name and asked if I would join them on a tour, just to kind of be a voice of the people of Joplin and the church and the effect that the tornado has had on us.
So very happy.
There were 6 people from our church that were killed. There were 99 families that lost their homes completely from our church, another 70 that had significant damage.
The tour is about raising awareness for what's still going on in the recovery effort in Joplin and Tuscaloosa. This tour is about raising some relief to help people, back into their homes, back into their lives, to help restore some of the churches.
We're riding bicycles from Joplin, Missouri to Atlanta, Georgia over about a 12-day period.
There's 13 of us riding. It's about 770 miles, about 75 miles a day.
We're willing to make a physical sacrifice to try and inspire other people to make a financial sacrifice, or a sacrifice of their service, or a sacrifice of their prayers.
In 2 Corinthians 8, it talks about the Macedonian church and the way that they gave themselves first to the Lord. Each one of us came to the realization that we had something we could give, and it was hope, it was encouragement.
I think going into it, we thought we were the ones going to bring hope to Joplin, but after being there and hearing stories of a husband who lost his wife and seeing the hope that he has, we're taking those stories of the hope in Joplin and taking those across the country.
What do we do now? What do we do next? I think the answer to that comes through the local church. We are called to serve our world, and that's when the church shines, when the good news of Jesus Christ is really out there as a light of the world.
Jesus' nicknames was Emmanuel, God with us. God never lets pain go to waste. He's going to redeem it somehow and change that into some powerful joy.
So it gives you a little bit of a sense. And, you know, to be honest, I've always been a behind-the-scene kind of guy. So just let me share with you then, riding in to an arena full of 15,000 people. And I was like, do we really have to do this? Can't I just go sit in the back room? But I just want to share this with you, just a quick clip.
I want you to do what we only do here so well, and welcome the 13 riders who have ridden from Joplin, Missouri, all the way to the west.
So this is crazy. I mean, it's crazy. And again, it's not because of what I've done necessarily. In fact, like I said, if I had known that was going to be the end of it, it's like, okay, I wouldn't have even started, to be honest, because I was just trying to leverage my presence. And to be truthful, the idea I had to raise $5,000, and it was like, I've raised lots of money for lots of other things, but not for me personally, and that was humbling. And what was humbling most about it was I didn't really have to ask. Once people found out I was going, they were willing to invest. Because if you can remember 2011, they had the tornadoes in Tuscaloosa, then they had the tornadoes in Joplin, and it was clear it was horrible. And so we actually took a group of folks and went to Tuscaloosa, and it was really out of that was early in June, where I just really felt like God was saying, you have to do something more. Because when you have people who have lost everything, it just really sort of settles you in a whole different way. And I think that's important for us to think about the circles that we want to draw around our own story, whether as individuals, as families, but even corporately. And so I want you to think, there's actually on the back of your handout this morning, there's some white space there, and it's there intentionally because I want you to draw a couple circles there where you can write some words that maybe some things that you need to be circling. Because I want you to see this, because this is just crazy, this story. So, Numbers, let's keep reading here, because this is what God does. Now the Lord sent a whirlwind that brought quail from the sea and let them fall all around the camp. For miles in every direction, there was quail flying about 3 feet above the ground. Okay? This is nuts. I want you to think about this. The Israelites, they are 50 miles inland from the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, get that in your mind. They're in a desert. They are 50 miles southwest of the Dead Sea. Now that's important to know because quail tend to live by water, and they don't fly long distances. So this is not only just a simple miracle of provision, but this is a meteorological miracle. I mean, because this doesn't happen this way. But literally the clouds burst. Now, I was trying to figure out how I could show this to you. So here is a Google map, and Mansfield's in the center, and Ashland's up there in the upper northeast corner, and you've got Lexington down here to the south, and Galion, okay? So that's sort of a sense to know, okay, what are we talking about? Because the scriptures tell us that it was about a day's walk. Well, for the Hebrews, that's 15 miles in any direction. And if anybody knows, you sort of take, this is my chance to do math, you square the radius and multiply it by pi. And then what that equals is this, okay? There is 700 square miles. There is 700 square miles that God had the quail occupy. Now, it wasn't just occupied, it was 3 foot deep occupied. So, the Israelites are crying for meat, and this is why I love God's sense of humor. He's like, okay, you want meat? Not a problem. I'm going to deliver. It's going to be fast food, it's going to be home delivery, and it's going to show up. and it's crazy because they say then in the story, if you look at the scriptures, that how much they collected. It was Quail. It was this apocalypse of such amazing standards. They each gathered no less than 10 homers, which is about 200 liters, which means, get this, 105 million quail. If you sort of figuring out the average size of a quail, that's a lot of quail. And I'm not talking about Dan or Maryland, you know what I mean? That was a 10, I'm sorry. Just dated myself, yeah. But the point is that God doesn't provide in dramatic fashion, God provides in dramatic proportion. So you want food, I'm going to provide you with food, he says. It was unpredictable and unprecedented, but Moses had the guts to circle the promise anyway. And when you circle the promise, you never know how God will provide. And that's where the title sort of to play off of the movie that was real popular with the kids, Cloudy But a Chance of Quail. Meatballs was the idea of food raining from heaven. So my question to you this morning, especially on this day that we celebrate communion, is there a promise that you need to circle? Is there something in your life right now that you need to circle for your children, for your grandchildren, for your marriage, for God's provision? Is there a circle of something that you're fearful about, something that you're facing, or a dream you're pursuing? You see, before the quails came, God asked Moses a question. And it's really the same question that he asks us. And it's a difficult question because he wants to know Numbers 11. And the Lord said to Moses, "Has my arm lost its power? Now you will see whether or not my word comes true." So my Cliff version of that, sort of the paraphrase is there any limit to God's power for us? Is there any limit to his desire to do something for us? Now, the obvious answer to that question is no. God is omnipotent, which means by definition there is nothing God cannot do. Yet many of us pray as if our problems are bigger than God. We need to realize that this is high-octane truth here that should fuel our faith. That God is infinitely bigger than your biggest problem or your biggest dream. He wants to give us something. It's interesting, A.W. Tozer, some of you may know, wrote this. He believed that it was our low view of God that is the cause of 100 lesser evils. But a high view of God is the solution to 10,000 temporal problems. If that's true, and I believe it is, then our biggest problem isn't an impending divorce or a business that's falling apart or being unemployed or dealing with what the doctor's going to tell us tomorrow, literally. And I'm not making light of any of that, but in order for us to regain a godly perspective on our life, we need to answer this question. Are your problems bigger than God, or is God bigger than your problems? Our biggest problem is our small view of God. Especially as we think about what we're going to celebrate here in just a moment. This literally changed our lives. This is a gift because of that instrument, because of what Christ has done for us. Our biggest problem is our small view of God. So again, we sit on this word from God. Is there any limit to my power, God says? Have you answered that question? I mean, there's two options. You can say yes or no. Until you come to the conviction that God's grace and power knows no limits, you will draw small circles. I love the way Patterson says this. Once you embrace the omnipotence of God, you'll draw ever-enlarging circles around your God-given, God-sized dreams. So my question is, how big is your God? Is he big enough to heal your marriage? Is he big enough to heal your child? Is he bigger than what may come out of an MRI or a negative medical test? He is bigger than your secret sin. Moses was perplexed by the promise God had given him. How could God possibly provide meat for a month? And it didn't add up. But at the critical juncture, when Moses had to decide whether or not to circle the promise, God posed this question. Posed the question. The size of your prayers depends on the size of your God. And if God knows no limits, then neither should our prayers as a church. God exists outside of the four space-time dimensions He created. We should pray that way. It reminds me, this is a kind of a fun old joke. The man who was trying to size up God, he says, "Well, God, how long is a million years to you?" And God said, "Well, a million years is like a second." And then the man asked, "How much is $1 million to you?" And God said, $1 million is like a penny. And the man smiled and said, "Could you spare a penny?" And God smiled back and said, "Sure, just wait a second." I mean, yeah, it's that idea. We need to see this too, is that with God, there is no big or small. There is no easy or difficult. There is no possible or impossible. That is difficult for us to comprehend because we live in the moment. Because the phone is going to ring with the results from the doctor. Or the messiness of our conversations we have. So we need to see that, and we need to embrace that. And it doesn't matter how long or how loud you pray, it comes down to your answer to this question. Back to this verse. Is God's arm long enough? Because I want to suggest this, that when God gives a vision, He also makes provision. Now, we're still trying to figure it out in our conversation with our neighbors. What does that mean for us with the building we have? So I want you to also think about, so what step of faith do you need to take? What decision do you need to make? On what promise do you need to put down and drive a stake and say, this is where I'm going to stand, and draw your circle? So in just a moment, the choir is going to come. And I want you to take a moment of reflection and just think about, what is it that God is calling you to? What is it that you need to have victory in? What is it that is going to stretch you? And then also, would you give consideration to what you think God is calling Linden Road to do? What is He calling us to do corporately as an outpost of the kingdom? And as I pray, I invite the choir members to go ahead and come forward so we can move on to the service. And let me just pray.